Well, I've spoken about this before, but I think it's very interesting that in the there's some videos going around about people talking about hypnosis, how hypnosis is used to manipulate people. And one of the keys to hypnosis, this guy was describing, it's not just what the hypnotist does at the time of the show, it's what he does before the show. He creates a certain atmosphere in the theater. And one of the things he does is he shows up late because it increases the anxiety level of the audience. When the audience is in a heightened emotional state, then they're more susceptible to suggestion. So starting late is something that creates people go into a heightened emotional state because you're expecting it to start at a certain time. And then he builds from there. He has them in a heightened emotional state. Then he can start to build on that until he can put them in the state of hypnosis. So when I saw that, it's going back 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, it's fascinating because I noticed that the Lubavitch Rebbe always started on time, like precisely on time. And it's the opposite effect, meaning to say the person who is not in a heightened emotional state from his artificial delaying, the person starting on time. The Rebbe is starting on time, and therefore the person is in his own right mind, so to speak. The person who's waiting late, is waiting for the late performer, he is not in his right mind, he's in a heightened emotional state. But the Rebbe is coming on time because he wants you as the listener to be in your right state of mind. He doesn't want you to be affected by any ancillary tools or techniques to try to get you more susceptible to hearing his message. He wants you to hear what he has to say, the Torah that he's teaching, in your right state of mind, without any tricks and without any manipulation. Because then it's much more authentic. And it's also, not only is it respectful to show up on time, but it's also much more authentic, the effect that it has on the person, because the person is going to be able to be, since in his right state of mind, he'll be able to listen to what the Rebbe is saying. He'll be able to evaluate it, challenge it, question it, dissect it, think it through, hear it accurately, and then really take ownership of the Torah that he's teaching.
When it comes to hypnosis, it was something that was done on the stage. And there was a fellow by the name of Milton Erickson. He decided to use it as a therapy. And basically what he needs to do, what needs to happen is the conscious mind needs to go to sleep, and the subconscious mind, which is brilliant, it runs all the subconscious aspects of the body, but it also has the maturity of a 7-year-old child. So it's very suggestible. And so that's what was happening on stage in order to entertain people, that people are willing to do strange things. However, this fellow Milton said, well, we could actually use it as a therapy, because we can reprogram the things that the subconscious mind is doing. Let's say it's showing certain emotions, it's triggering certain emotions at certain times which are not useful. So how about we're going to put the person into a state where their conscious mind is sleeping, and then we're going to give the suggestions to the subconscious mind. We're going to give we're going to reprogram. Now, of course, there could be resistance from the conscious mind later on, so the person needs to be consciously aware that it's happening and has to embrace the changes. Then what was realized is that it's possible to use certain words that the subconscious mind is susceptible to, and a person can remain conscious. The person could remain conscious while the programming is going on, and the advantage of that is that their freedom of choice is not being undermined. In other words, the Rebbe wrote that he's very cautious about hypnotherapy, and he believes that hypnotherapy could be used in a case of that's of life and death. of life and death. But otherwise, if it's not life and death, it shouldn't be used, because he's very wary on taking away people's freedom of choice. And in general, we need to understand that lesson for any time where people are being forced to do things that they don't want to do. That is not what the Rebbe wanted. You see from the letter about hypnotherapy, he wanted people to have the freedom of choice. So in a case where there is, it's a matter of life and death, so the Rebbe said, okay, hypnotherapy is okay. Otherwise, if it's not life and death, he doesn't want people's freedom of choice to be taken away. So with so NLP would be to use programming language for the subconscious mind while the person is aware of what's going on. Then that wouldn't be a violation of a person's freedom of choice, because the conscious mind is awake, and it's the conscious mind that has the freedom of choice. There is also the superconscious mind. Now, in Tanya we would call, in Chassidus we would call the subconscious mind the nefesh habahamis. We would call the conscious mind the nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual soul. That's where a person's personality is, really. And then there's the superconscious mind, which is the nefesh elokis, the divinity in a person. That's the part of the person where no matter what situation, a person can ask themselves, how could I behave in the most honorable way in the present situation? And that the most honorable way to choose, the person has the freedom of choice to choose the most, to behave in the most honorable way. That is something that's what Viktor Frankl called the superconscious mind. We would call the divine, the elokus, the nefesh elokis, the divine soul in a person. So we have these three types of three parts of the person. And those are different types of therapy, which was quite opposite of Milton Erickson, by a lady called Victoria, and I forgot her second name. So what she would do is she would realize that a lot of the problems that people are having with each other is because they went into a hypnotic state and they don't know how to get out of it. So in certain aspects of their lives, they are conscious, but in other aspects of their lives, they are hypnotic. And you can notice that people, when it became hypnotic, when they speak in ways where they say you always, because always is something that's impossible, because there's nothing that's always besides Hashem. So therefore, the conscious mind doesn't like the word always and goes to sleep. So that's why you notice when people say, you always do this, suddenly there's a lot of emotion, because the subconscious emotional mind is taking over and the conscious mind is going to sleep. Or you never do this. Never is also something that's very difficult for the rational conscious mind to understand. So it goes to sleep and passes over the baton, so to speak, the leadership to the subconscious mind, and a person gets very emotional. It's a 7-year-old child inside a person that is active at that point in time. So this lady, this therapist, realized that how do we get people out of the hypnosis that they've put themselves into? So there's certain words that make a person think more specifically. Like how specifically? Or that you could ask, always? Have you thought of a time where this didn't happen? So we're getting a person out of thinking in general terms, because hypnotic language patterns are general language patterns, thinking in general concepts. And when you get the person to think more specifically, like you would ask a question, how specifically, how exactly is that so? So we're going into the parts, and the parts actually takes a person out of hypnosis. Now, there is a way to get into hypnosis even when a person's going into the parts, and that's called nitpicking. In other words, we go into a small detail and make that the everything. So one more time, when we nitpick into a small detail and we make that the everything, we make that the holistic everything, so it actually puts a person into hypnosis. The way a person gets out of hypnosis is by speaking specifics, but seeing also the bigger picture at the same time. So the one detail is not becoming everything. There are other details as well. It's not always, it's not never. And it's a different form of therapy. It's about waking a person up by making a person think specifically. Like, here's an example of taking a person out of hypnosis, or a child out of hypnosis, self-hypnosis. Ask them to count backwards. See, people can count forwards, but it'd be second nature. They're not even thinking about what they're doing. But if they're thinking back, counting backwards, or you ask them to do a math problem. So what happens is the left brain wakes up. And when the left brain wakes up, that means the cognitive brain wakes up. So the subconscious mind is no longer the one that's running the show, the one that's processing. So that is a little summary of how hypnosis is used. So in marketing, hypnosis is used. So when you give people anxiety, you're already revealing an emotion, and that's how hypnosis is used.